Hello, I'm Adrian Finnegan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, as European leaders begin to formulate a strategy for Brexit negotiations, we look at the potential pitfalls and dangers facing business and the EU itself on separating the UK from the trading bloc. There's something rotten in the state of Brazil. As bans of its meat exports sweep across the globe, we look at whether the world is about to face a shortage in supplies and how the scandal could impact future trade deals. Also this week, the race to make money in space, how commercial possibilities in the cosmos are rocketing. The Brexit battle lines are being drawn. European leaders are due to meet at the end of April when they'll lay out their strategy for talks with the UK, following Theresa May's formal notification on the British departure from the European Union. A deal is expected to be reached by March 2019, and a lot is at stake. In 2014, 45% of all UK exports went to the EU. That was $284 billion worth of goods. After Germany, the UK is the trading bloc's second largest economy, and it imports over $360 billion worth of goods from its fellow EU members. In 2015, the UK contributed over $16 billion to the EU budget and received about $7.4 billion back in aid and subsidies from Brussels. Fredrik Eriksson is the director of the European Centre for International Political Economy in Brussels. He joins us from there now. Fredrik, good to have you with us on Counting the Cost. How is the European Commission preparing for Brexit? Do we have any idea of its strategy for negotiations? What will be its priorities?
Well, I think we know pretty much about the thinking, not just on the part of the European Commission, but also on the part of key member states and how they want to see things evolve during the negotiations with the Brits. What they want to do is to start with sort of the divorce bill, to try to get a settlement with the UK about how much the UK should contribute to the EU's budget after it has left, to deal with things like pension costs for civil servants in the European Commission and the European Parliament, for instance. Then they want to deal with people, sort of Europeans living in the UK and Brits living in Europe, finalizing an agreement on residency rights for those people that moved to other countries during the time when Britain was part of the EU. There's a host of other issues they want to deal with as well, but after they have managed to get a broad settlement on these issues, then, according to the European Commission, they would like to start negotiate about a new future trade agreement that is going to substitute the trading arrangement that now exists between the UK and the EU.
So you make it sound as though trade will actually be left until almost the very end of these negotiations. What are the implications of that?
I think on the part of the European Commission and others in EU member states, they think that sort of the idea that you can conclude a very good trade agreement between the EU and the UK in the course of the 2-year framework that exists for exit negotiations, that idea is naive to start with. So there is no point trying to waste time of trying to finish things before the end of these of this 2-year framework. So it's better to find perhaps a bridging arrangement which partly would deal with all those issues that the UK need to phase out from in its current EU membership, and then about the phase-in of new trading rights and obligations that will come under the new trade agreement. But that's something which is going to take a longer time.
The British airline industry is concerned that it could find itself shut out of the European Open Skies deal. Are they right to be concerned, do you think?
This is one of the issues where everyone involved are almost dead set on finding an arrangement which is going to avoid significant disruption for airlines, for passengers, or for anyone else that are involved in this particular business. But it's also one of these issues which just shows how deeply embedded into the European Union that the UK is, and how many issues they need to disentangle themselves from in order to find a good arrangement for the UK once it has left. So I'm sure there will be an agreement at the end of the day, but it's going to be technically complicated, perhaps politically charged at points as well.
Major banks with big operations in London seem to have given up almost on passporting. They've decided that that's not going to continue. They're moving jobs or making plans to move jobs to places like Paris and Frankfurt and Dublin. What are the implications of that for the industry?
I don't think they have given up on passporting rights, perhaps for some particular parts of the financial sector, but not certainly for all parts. And you can see still a heavy lobbying in Brussels and elsewhere around Europe from city-based interest in London that want to maintain broadly the market access it has to the EU right now. However, I think all people involved will broadly say that this is probably not going to happen. And it's not going to happen for a variety of reasons. One is that passporting rights is something for those countries that are members of the EU or members of the single market, and the UK has decided it wants to leave both. Added to that is, of course, that you have Paris and Frankfurt that wants to woo banks and other financial companies in the city today in order to relocate them to their cities or to their regions and attract investments and trying to improve the status of their own financial hubs. I don't think sort of close watchers of the financial industry realistic to think that Paris or Frankfurt or any other city in Europe for that matter are realistic competitors with the UK when it comes to offering sort of the best human capital, the best technology and the best access to all the services you need if you want to access or supply a very good banking, insurance, security services, etc.
Frederick, if a deal is reached that gives the UK significant access to the single market, albeit with restrictions, but without many of the obligations, many would see that as a pretty good deal. Is that perhaps going to encourage, if Britain gets that sort of a deal, other nations in the bloc that have up-and-coming EU-sceptic movements to push to leave as well?
On the one hand, you're going to find that there is pretty strong consensus among the membership, and especially in the European Union institutions, that you cannot both have the cake and eat the cake. So that sort of classic remark from Boris Johnson about his favoured policy is probably not going to stand up if Britain tries it in negotiations with the EU. Having that said, I think there is also a fairly strong wing on the membership that wants to keep very strong trade and economic relations to the UK, partly because they have surpluses in trade with them, partly because they like the idea of having an open, globally oriented economy like the UK very much involved in policy matters in Europe. But whether that wing itself is going to win over those who wants to set an example with Brexit now, to attach a very hefty price tag to Brexit in order to deter others to go in that direction, that we'll have to see.
Frederick, we'll leave it there. It's been great to talk to you. Many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, if you eat meat, chances are you've eaten meat from Brazil. It's the world's largest exporter of poultry and beef. But this position is under threat following bans by the European Union, China and others after it emerged that bribes were paid to Brazilian officials to pass off spoiled and contaminated meat as suitable for sale on the global market. Before we look at the possible implications on prices and food supplies, as well as on trade, Teresa Bow reports.
José Crispin has been working with cattle all his life. He lives in Paulínia, one of the many beef-producing areas in Brazil. Last week, police revealed that beef and poultry factories were bribing authorities to extend the expiration date on some products. They also said they were using chemicals to conceal rotten food. José Crispin says he's worried.
We work hard for this sector, and we know the country is not doing well. Now the crisis of the meat. That is our job. We have a calendar for vaccination. We follow all the rules we are asked to. We ensure that all the livestock we have here reaches high quality levels.
People here are fearing the consequences of the meat and poultry scandal. They claim that it's a sector that employs over 400,000 people, and that with the current economic crisis, Brazil cannot afford to lose any more jobs. Brazil exports animal proteins to at least 150 countries. It is the largest meat exporter in the world. The government has tried to downplay the scandal, saying that only 3 meat-packing plants have been shut down out of more than 4,000 in the country. But 21 have been forced to halt exports and are under investigation. Professor Pedro Felicio claims food controls in Brazil are very high and doubts the seriousness of the investigation.
There were many problems in that investigation. I believe they exaggerated. We had police officers talking about food. They missed technical experts in that operation. The officers said they were using acid in the food, but it's all authorized. I think there is a political motivation behind this.
Political or not, the scandal has already had an impact, as countries like China have halted chilled beef and poultry imports from here.
Confidence is something that we need time to get, but we can lose it in a short period of time. But we are confident that the relationship we built with the markets was built with hard work, and we believe we will be able to regain this relationship even stronger than before.
Beef is a matter of pride for most Brazilians. They claim it is among the best in the world. And even though the scandal has hurt exports, it has not stopped people here from eating one of the foods they love best.
Well, let's bring in now Carlos Caicedo, who's a senior principal analyst of Latin America with HS Market. He joins us now live from London. Carlos, we're only just beginning to witness the fallout from this scandal. The list of places beginning to ban Brazilian meat is growing by the day. Is Brazil's position as the world's top meat exporter now under threat? Are there any countries waiting in the wings to jump into its place?
Indeed, Brazil is extremely concerned. I think the Minister of Agriculture said that if China and the European Union decided to extend this ban beyond the few weeks they are talking about, it will be a catastrophe for Brazil. And in terms of who will step in, there are countries like Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay that will be ready to step in. In fact, in 2008, when the super cycle soft commodity prices went through the roof, Brazil was unable to supply every market, and the main beneficiary of this was, for example, Paraguay, which jumped to become the 4th largest meat exporter in the world. So definitely these countries will benefit from a situation like this.
How likely is this to impact the supply chain? Are we going to see meat being less available around the world? What's it going to do to prices?
Well, indeed, if the situation become critical, then Brazil is a key supplier here. It will impact on prices, but I think we have seen so far is in the case of China, they talk about 1 week ban for the time being. In the case of the European Union, they have been targeting only those 21 plants, and they're asking the Brazilian government to guarantee that these plants will not be exporting meat. The same on the other countries has been a temporary ban. So it will now depend on the Brazilian government to reassure foreign buyers that they are doing what it has to be done to tackle this problem.
This couldn't have come at a worse time for the Brazilian economy. Are there likely to be knock-on effects to other sectors, other industries?
Yes, I think, well, not necessarily. I will be more worried about the ability of the Brazilian economy to bounce back. You must remember that the country has been contracted since 2014, has been through the world recession in 100 years, and it appears that the economy has hit bottom and may grow slightly this year. If the meat industry is badly hit by this crisis and trade flows are not restored in the next few weeks, I will say it will impact negatively on this new economic revival. I don't see any connection with other sectors like iron ore, like soya, sugar, oranges, etc. I don't see why this will have a knock-on effect on that. But when you look at the aggregated economy numbers, this industry employs 6 million people and export nearly $13 billion a year. It must have an impact if this sector suffers badly.
Does a scandal like this highlight the difficulties in trying to link markets that have very different standards and ways of policing those standards? Does it perhaps threaten any potential trade deal between Mercosur and the EU, for example?
I think it will add an additional difficulty to the whole discussion. And we must remember that the relationship between Brazil and Mercosur and the European Union hasn't been an easy one. And one of the main reasons, in my opinion, is that there is a significant protectionism coming from the European Union. And when you look why it hasn't worked in the past, one of the main reasons is the complaint from the South American countries that there is a lot of protectionism in the European Union. Until that is not sorted out, no major progress will be there. I will say this will add to the difficulty in the negotiation through more stringent regulation, especially on related health regulation for the food industry. But I will say the main issue is not necessarily the regulatory aspect, but the more wider one of protectionism coming from the European Union in many instances.
Carlos, it's been great to have you with us on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed. Still to come on Counting the Cost, we look at why the ships of the desert are finding themselves in uncharted territory in Mongolia. Now, potential profits are fueling a new space race. SpaceX is one of a number of private companies that are pushing extraterrestrial boundaries as they strive to make human engagement beyond Earth more commercially viable. The US rocket company has had some success. It recently celebrated the return of its Dragon craft from the International Space Station, and US President Donald Trump has signed a new bill that promises more funding for exploration. It also encourages NASA to transition more of its activities to the commercial sector. Well, in 2015, the space economy was worth $323 billion globally. Commercial activities accounted for 76% of this. With a combined wealth of $175 billion, 13 of the world's richest men are investing heavily in the industry, including SpaceX's Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, and Blue Origin's Jeff Bezos. Colonizing Mars, space tourism, and finding cures for diseases are just some of the activities propelling these billionaires to put their money into cosmic ventures. National governments still play a vital role, though. Along with the US, Russia, China, the EU, India and Japan are now all vying for the opportunities they believe can be made by going intergalactic. Stuart Martin is the CEO of the satellite applications Catapult, a company which works to foster economic growth through the exploration of space. He joins us now from London. Stuart, there's some very rich people who are putting their money into space exploration at the moment. Is there any money to be made in space? Is anyone making any money, or is it just a plaything for the rich?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a fantastically exciting time for the space sector right now, and there's a big change happening where more and more private money is going into space to take advantage of the government spending that's been happening over the last 50 years. So there is a sense that we're on the cusp of a new commercial era for space, and you're right. It's a lot of the the internet billionaires who are leading this charge, people like Elon Musk, people like Jeff Bezos, who are funding their own space programs. And, well, the fact is, yes, there are people making money from space. There are people who are, people have been delivering commercial space services for a number of years, but that transition that's happening now is it's set to accelerate, and it's set to have a much bigger impact on all of our lives.
You talk about commercial space services. Where is this money going? Is it into satellite launches? Is it into scientific research, colonizing Mars, or space tourism?
Well, it's all of the above. So, the commercial space services that exist now, it's largely been about communication and broadcast services. I mean, I'm sure your company, Al Jazeera, they make a lot of use of satellites in the broadcast industry. And that the shift that's happening now is around data and around the use of images for services that go beyond just the communications. What the internet investors are looking at is some of the changes that are needed now are to try and change the economics of getting into space. So launcher technology hasn't really changed very much since the very first rockets of the 50s and 60s, the things that we're used to from the Apollo era. We're basically using the same technology now, and that's and the costs of that mean that there's still a significant barrier for getting new satellites into space. But the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they're trying to find new ways, reusable launchers. People like Richard Branson at Virgin trying to find new types of space planes that will change the way that we now get into space, both for satellites and for people and tourists. And I think that's what potentially creates the opportunity for a really enormous proliferation in the number of satellites and the number of different ways that people can start using it. And that's the punt that people are making, and that's the opportunity that people are chasing after.
Of course, China and India now very much spacefaring nations as well. When we talk about Chinese and Indian money, is there any private money involved in their space programs, or is it all coming from the government?
Well, I think that's most of their interest is in government funded at the moment, but their interest is about the economic development of their own countries. They're also seeing the commercial opportunities that are on the horizon. India, for example, spends a lot on space technology in order to support its education system, in order to support its healthcare system, and so they're using it a lot for economic development. And similarly for China, they're using it a lot for their construction industry, to understand the breadth of development that's going on in their country, and just to understand the pace of change across their whole geospatial environment. So it's being government led, but I don't think there's any reason to expect that the impacts of that and the resulting applications are going to be any less commercial than what's going on in the West.
So what advice would you give to individuals, companies who are looking perhaps to put money into getting into space and making a profit?
Well, I speak to investors all the time, and my advice to them is, the space industry is changing. It's not the simple, the long time scale, high investment, high risk business that we're all used to from the days when it was largely government funded. There are returns to be made. We work with a number of companies who start up quickly, they get to profits quickly, using the data that's coming from satellites, and they might be serving the agriculture market, or they might be serving the insurance market. But there are some very exciting businesses around, and all the time that investors are thinking that space is not a sector for us, they're missing out on some great deals.
Stuart, really great to talk to you on Counting the Cost. Many thanks indeed. Now, they are an essential companion to man in some of the world's most inhospitable places, shipping supplies and produce across difficult terrain. In Mongolia's Gobi Desert, camels have been a feature of life for millennia. But as Pearlie Jacob reports now, their future is uncertain.
The sun is closer from the camel's back. This is an old Mongolian saying in praise of Bactrian camels. Without them, humans may have never settled in the cold and arid Gobi Desert. But their numbers have plummeted since the end of communism in 1990, as herders began to opt for more lucrative animals.
A camel is much bigger than goats and sheep, but its wool is much less profitable. A kilo of camel wool is less than $2, while a kilo of cashmere is $20 to $25. So people see more sense in herding smaller animals.
There are fewer than 400,000 Bactrian camels in Mongolia. That's less than 1% of the total livestock population of 60 million. Local festivals like this one aim to promote the camel and celebrate its strength and endurance by racing them. It's an exciting competition, but not always well at the finish line. Local wildlife officials organizing the event believe the winning camel is an illegal crossbred offspring of a wild camel and is therefore disqualified. The Great Gobi strictly protected area in southwest Mongolia is home to a camel so rare and endangered, a captive breeding and release program is perhaps its only hope of avoiding extinction. Mongolians call these camels hafgai, or flat, because of their flatter skulls and smaller humps. Only about 1,500 of these critically endangered animals roam the Gobi Desert between China and Mongolia. These camels were once thought to be closely related to the Bactrian, until genetic tests proved them to be a new and separate species, separated from the Bactrian more than 700,000 years ago. They are the only truly wild camels in the world. Conservationists say preventing crossbreeding with domestic Bactrian camels is critical for preserving both species.
The Haftai is the only wild two-humped camel in the world. If it goes extinct, the only representational group of this family will disappear. That's why protecting this animal and increasing its population to preserve its gene pool is of paramount importance.
Domestic Bactrians and wild camels have been an important part of the Gobi landscape for centuries. Wild camels may be in greater danger of becoming extinct, but both species require all the help they can get to cope with the shared threats of climate change and increased incidence of drought in the region.
Pearlie Jacob reporting. That's our show for this week. Don't forget, there's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page where you'll find individual reports, links, even entire episodes for you to catch up with. You can also get in touch with us at Twitter. I'm at @afinnegan. Please use the hashtag AJCTC when you do, or you can drop us a line at countingthecost@aljazeera.net. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Adrian Finnegan from the whole team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.